Welcome back to Chris Wyatt Africa. This is Chris live in central Pennsylvania with an update on Liberia's elections. Wow, it's hard to believe it's been 15 years. Of course, some of you may know that, of course, I was stationed in Liberia at the American Embassy, where I was the security assistance officer running the Office of Defense Cooperation there, and then later known as the Office of Security Cooperation, and was the lead person responsible for the rebuilding of the armed forces of Liberia in the aftermath of the Civil War. Now, I inherited the program from my predecessor, Dan Honkin, but when I took over, because the Bush administration had underfunded the program, and I think people were overly ambitious, because the program had been underfunded, I inherited a program that was in grave trouble, grave condition. Not because of my predecessor, who did a bang-up job, but he was really hamstrung by resources, and as was I, although we did get resources later on. But my responsibility was multifaceted, but I would say twofold, but it was multifold. Lots of responsibilities when I was in Liberia, as far as the Armed Forces of Liberia and our security relations with the government of Liberia and post-conflict Liberia. At that time, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf had just been elected president and had taken over from the transitional government and was running the country. Her defense minister was Brownie Samakai, someone I interacted with quite a bit. So I was there for about 15 months, and I originally thought I was coming to Liberia simply to have a caretaker job, arrange for training for their new soldiers to go to our non-commissioned officer courses, buy some light equipment like uniforms and field gear, things like that, and provide training and education for their officers and NCOs. That's what I thought it was going to be. But when I arrived, I quickly found out that the Army wasn't complete. The Army that was supposed to have been finished under a State Department program on a security sector reform was nowhere near being finished, folks. In fact, it was it was a mess. And again, no fault of my predecessor, who did a great job, or of the ambassador, who was fantastic, Don Booth. But I was there. I had an important mission that was, it's panned out to work really well. A lot of people ask me what my thoughts would be about the Armed Forces of Liberia looking down the road. And now it's been 15 years, so there's some distance, some time and space between myself and that experience in Liberia. What I will say about that experience in Liberia is what I said at the time. If the military ever misbehaves when they do the war crimes investigation, they won't be calling me, because all the mortar rounds and the ammunition boxes were stamped with "Attention American Embassy, Monrovia, attention Commander Dan Honkin." just a little joke. None of the ammunition had my name on it. It was all ordered when he was there. No, but just all seriousness, people asked me what I think, and I said, well, I would hope that the Armed Forces of Liberia is a force for good, and that was been my focus. That's where my energy went. That's where my drive was, to lead and inculcate moral, just values in the Armed Forces of Liberia. And it was a tough mission. Very challenging environment in Liberia, a country where people are accustomed to, embellishing, lying, telling fairy tales to get what they need, cooking up fake, academic credentials. We try to tell people you can't do that. It's morally bankrupt, and we wouldn't accept that in the military. But anyway, I would say that the AFL's performance in the Ebola crisis, Ebola hemorrhagic fever, the Ebola virus outbreak in 2013-2014, as well as their role in peacekeeping in Mali and elsewhere, have proven that they are a force for good. They've been a good example for society. Not perfect. They're underfunded. You get a few bad apples in every bunch, but that's always going to be something that comes up. But the reason for this live stream is related to the election that just took place, the presidential election. Now, this will be the second successful, peaceful transition of power in a country that suffered through well over a century of nonsense, and certainly a 13-year civil war. But now Liberia, whose first post-conflict president was Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, the former World Bank and United Nations official economist. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf served 2 terms. In Liberia, the president's term is 5 years. She served 2 terms as president. And her vice president was Joseph Boakai, who has also been a diplomat, known as Ambassador Boakai, but previously Vice President Boakai. Joseph Boakai, a person I've met many, many times, rather quiet, reserved figure in my experience with him, but certainly a smart Liberian official, knows the Liberian political system. Ran against George Weah when Weah was elected the last time. In 2018, Weah became president. He had a close vote in the first round. Liberia is one of those not first past the post. It's got to be 50% or more. 50 plus 1 gets you the election. So if you don't get 50 plus 1 in the first round, there will be a second round, and that was the case in 2018. That is the case again in 2017 to 2018. That is the case again now in 2023. The election goes to a second round. So in the first round this time, it was very close. Just 7,000 votes separated the two candidates. It was Weah leading by 7,000 votes with 43.63% of the vote, and Boakai something like 43.36. It was very, very close. And because neither got 50 plus 1, they had to do a runoff. Well, the last time around, when they had the runoff, George Weah, the popular soccer figure who talked about bringing in fresh face, younger blood, very well-known international soccer star who played at Paris Saint-Germain for years, he won easily in the runoff. Youth vote came out and had a big impact on getting him elected to office. This time around, different results. Different results. The second round went to Joseph Boakai, the 78-year-old former vice president and ambassador for Liberia, has won the election. Now, let me give you some notes here from this election. Weah yesterday conceded the results based on the National Elections Commission release of preliminary results. The 78-year-old former vice president and ambassador won 51% of the votes, roughly, according to the commission. Now, with 99.58% of the ballots counted from the election on Tuesday as of Friday night, Boakai was leading with 50.89% versus George Weah's 49.11. So it's not a huge lead, but it's a full percentage plus, almost 2%. And that is far greater than than before the runoff. So this is a big reversal, as I said, from what happened last time, where in the second round of election voting, Weah clearly took out Boakai. But a lot of people are frustrated with George Weah's administration. We'll talk about that in a moment. Now, this is what George Weah did, and this deserves lots of credit. You know, one of the things I said about Nelson Mandela is love him, hate him, see him as a terrorist, see him as a freedom fighter, whatever you think of Nelson Mandela. You have to give the man props for serving one term as president and setting a historic example for African leaders to leave the stage after their time in office. Goodluck Jonathan also left after his term in office in Nigeria, but he doesn't get much credit. So, in an address to the nation, George Weah said, "The results announced tonight, though not final, indicate that Ambassador Joseph N. Boakai is in a lead that we cannot surpass. Therefore, a few minutes ago, I spoke with President-elect Joseph Boakai to congratulate him on his victory." It's very magnanimous of George Weah. Tonight, we acknowledge the results. Let us also recognize the true winners of these elections are the people of Liberia. 100% agreed. 100%. George Weah's words will echo, hopefully down the years, for people as a good example of a magnanimous comment on losing the election in Africa. The Liberian people have spoken, and we've heard their voice. Yeah, he said that's a lead that we just can't surpass, as I already mentioned. Now, George Weah said, "I urge you to follow my example and accept the result of the elections," adding that our time will come again in 2029. Well, that, of course, is referencing the next time there'll be a president's election. Weah will still be around, most likely, one would presume, and he intends probably to run again in 2029. Now, like I said, this runoff was triggered because the vote difference was just 7,000 votes. I think it was 7,600. Very close. This will ensure a second peaceful transfer of power in Liberia, a country that was beset by a 13-year conflict, a crazy conflict. Now, Nigeria's new president, Bola Tinubu, was among the first to congratulate President-elect Boakai, also commending George Weah's sterling example, undiluted patriotism and statesmanship. He has defied the stereotype that peaceful transitions of power are untenable in West Africa. And I think perhaps that may be one of the most valuable things that George Weah has done here. In a region that is beset by nonsense, by dictatorial leaders, by corruption, by theft, by coups, by chaos, the 3 C's that I talk about all the time. Coups, corruption, and chaos. CQ. That's West Africa. Mali, Niger, even Senegal nearly had something going on. The Gambia, the nonsense in Sierra Leone years ago. George Weah has set an example for African leaders in the region. And well done to him. Lots of major props to George Weah for something that is rarely accomplished in Africa, let alone in West Africa. And this is encouraging. Now, Liberia is a country suffering immensely, and I did say I would talk briefly about why George Weah lost the election. A lot of Liberians are very frustrated at the corruption that persists under the Weah administration. Now, I worked with Liberians, and, I don't blame George Weah for this corruption unless he ignored it. I have no indication he did. Certainly his government had a lot of corruption going on. And this is no insult intended for Liberians. If you're a Liberian and you're honest and you admit the truth, corruption is a way of life. It's how people survived in the hard times. That doesn't make it right, doesn't excuse it, but it does help explain And that's a challenge. It's a real challenge. Now, the United States bears a special responsibility, not because of our historic relationship with Liberia, which most Americans don't even know about and don't even care about, but Liberians take it very seriously. The United States has a special responsibility here because we poured billions of dollars of assistance into that country. We rebuilt the armed forces. We helped rebuild the justice sector. We helped economically kickstart the country and install electrification once again. All of that's far from finished. But we bear a special responsibility because of the taxpayer dollars we poured in there. And that special responsibility should be to urge and provide oversight to help the Liberian government move along. President-elect Boakai is not new to this stage. As I said, he served 10 years as vice president under Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, so he knows the levers of power, he knows the actors, he knows the resources he doesn't have at his disposal, and the few that he does have at his disposal. So President-elect Boakai should be able to do things well. If he does this term, he will end it in about 83 years of age, and we wish him well. And good luck to President-elect Boakai, to President George Weah on his magnanimous concession speech and his effort to preserve peace and security in Liberia. And congratulations to Liberians in Liberia. And for all those of you in the diaspora, get your ass back to Liberia and fix that country. Stop draining other people of their resources and telling people in D.C. that we owe Liberia. We don't owe Liberia anything. You owe Liberia. Quit sitting in your fancy houses in Minneapolis and in Silver Spring, Maryland, sucking down your six-figure salaries with your great success in America. Congratulations on that, by the way, while bemoaning the fact that Liberia is suffering in misery and poverty. Get back there and fix it. Take your human capital skills back, your business acumen, your experience, your educational credentials, and fix your own country because it needs you. Otherwise, you're not a real patriot. Just saying. Anyway, folks, that's it. Thanks a lot for tuning in. Be sure to leave a comment behind. Appreciate your support for the channel and for this brief live broadcast on the outcome of the presidential elections in Liberia. Good luck, President Boakai. Cheers, everybody. Thanks a lot.